Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in. Wanted to let you guys know up front, this video here is a long one. It's 35 minutes long, but it's jam-packed full of good information on how to wire your car from the get-go. Now, the first part of the video is a little bit of a proof of concept. I thought it was what I was going to go with for the year to start, but turns out I didn't like it, so I started over in the second half of the video. So, kind of shows you the ups and downs of building something like this, and this is how I did it. Let me know what you think, and enjoy. Damn. Alright everybody, we are back in the wiring studio. The place is destroyed. I made a huge mess of it again. I made a lot of progress and this video is going to be all over the place. So I apologize. I'm going to try to kind of put things in a timeline, but basically I started working and kind of did a proof of concept. I thought I was going to roll with it for the year, but it turns out that I'm way too OCD and I hold my wiring to a higher standard. So basically what I'm going to do is kind of start my plans over, and things have gotten much better just in the first couple steps anyway. So I made a little stand to put the dash on to kind of hold it up so I'm not balancing it on tools and bottles of alcohol, you know, that kind of bottle of alcohol. I don't drink on video. I made a little stand. I'm going to put the dash on it and then we'll go from there. But for now, let's get that dash mounted up and then I'll go over what I did on the panel that was different than last time. So like I said, this video is going to be all over the place. I'm going to try to streamline it, but bear with me. It's pretty interesting stuff, so let's get started. Alright everybody, we have got 69 days until Champ Car starts. Well, the AER race that we're going to race our Champ Car in. So we got to get busy on this wiring. I got a lot to do. I've got quite a bit done on the dash. The radio is ready to go. The fuse box is mounted. The displays, which are just two phones, are mocked up. And basically what I got to do is finish the mock-up so that James can prepare the more permanent parts. Like this part here is a mock-up, and he can really make any more of these that he wants. So what I got to do right now is basically finalize the wiring and the design of the dash so that we can make the permanent parts, get them in there and get it done. And this thing needs to go in before we can put anything else in the car, wiring wise and really interior wise. So I got to get hot on this bad boy, get this thing done. There's quite a bit of stuff to do, especially with the steering wheel, so I got to get busy. It's a big project. So all that aside, I'm going to be doing a lot of time lapses. There's going to be a lot of time lapse start and stop. I'm going to do a couple things and then I'll stop and explain it, do a couple things and stop and explain it. So without really much else to say about this, let's get going. So I got the mounting plate clearance for test fit for now, so I can start building everything. But I drew this pink line on it as you saw, and that'll be kind of the more final version of how this thing's going to sit in here. I just realized that line can't go right there, so that was a dumb mistake. Gotta leave a little bit right there. All right, cool. So now that the purple line is in there, we can make a more final mounting plate, and I think James might make another one, and then we can be done with this part of it and cut some more weight off it, because this ABS is kind of heavy. I mean, this right here weighs a couple pounds, but most of it's cell phones, but you get the idea. Any weight is good weight shaped. So I'm going to get the switches put in and get that plate mounted up with just some regular screws for now, not the ones we'll actually use. I don't have those yet, so get a better idea, and then we can flip this baby over and start wiring everything together. So this part's coming along pretty quickly. So I've got the switch panel itself assembled. Now these switches aren't labeled. I may figure out a way to label them or just familiarize the guys on the team with them. These switches here shouldn't really need used a whole lot, and they are color coded. And as you can see here, this one's orange, red, green, blue, 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 white, white. So their actual job is, this is headlights, well, all lights on the car, because we don't really need to separate them. It's either night or it's not. We don't have turn signals, so don't need that either. But headlights on off, high beams on off, which also will turn on the light bar. Then we've got wipers on off, wipers on high. Then we've got the cool suit on off, washer fluid spray, and then we've got the rain light and the pit procedure. So that will turn on interior lights, that will turn on the pit limiter, the radiator fan, and something else that I can't remember right now. But anyway, that one's got a pretty big job. That's the one that we'll probably use the most. Once the rest of these get turned on, we might play with wipers on high, and then honestly everything else is probably just going to stay on. So I don't really think we need to worry too much about it. But once I get them wired up, we'll turn the lights on and see what they look like. So let's keep moving. So as you can see, it's a little chaotic back here, but I have two junctions set up. One's positive, one is ground. Then I've got my wires coming out of them. Got it hooked up to the power supply. Bam. We have got we've got illumination. All the switches click on, click off. I didn't damage any of them. Now we got to focus on IG2 and start. Now these guys here, this one I want to light up right off of this switch. So it's not going to be on the same logic as these or this one. So this switch needs to light up off of the main switch. And when the main switch is turned on, IG2 will light up. When IG2 is pressed, all of these light up, including the steering wheel. So this one controls everything in the car through relays and whatever other logic I have to use. So what I need to do now is run these grounds to this switch. So this switch is just going to control all the grounds. All right, so this is a super kind of dry run, I guess. Best way to explain it. Things are just kind of cobbed together on the back, as you can see, but I wanted to kind of show the logic here. So right now, the power supply over there is technically our main switch. So when our main switch is turned on, this is what will happen. IG2 will light up. Then IG2, you press, and then all of these buttons and all of the buttons on the steering wheel should come on. Now, this camera is not really doing justice in this light to how vibrant those switches really are. They look great and the colors are super deep. They look a little kind of faded here, but that's a little better there. But you get the idea. Alright, so this switch panel is pretty well ready to have a check run on it to make sure that all of the wires are run to the position they need to be in that 12-pin connector that you saw me wire. Now, all of those switches get a ground signal from this point. They then, when pressed, connect a ground to a relay that will then turn on the headlights, the wipers, what have you. So these aren't labeled right now, but a couple of these switches are a special situation where it's not just as simple as a ground in and a ground out. They run other places first, and what I need to do is make sure that when these switches are turned on, those grounds go the right places. So what I'm going to do is explain the headlights and the high beams, and then the wipers and the high wipers are the same kind of situation. But first, I'm just going to explain these. So essentially, we have a ground. And you have to pardon me, I'm left-handed, so this is a little tough to work around. So that ground then goes into the headlight switch. So the headlight switch is normally open. And there's a little bit more to this switch. There's a normally closed as well. I'm going to leave that off because it's not used in this specific switch. Now that ground continues out and goes into the high beam switch here. So the high beam switch, the normally closed, is used, so there's a contact there and there's a contact there. Then this runs out to the headlight relay coil, and then that continues on to battery positive. This continues out to the high beam relay coil, and that also continues on to battery positive. So when the headlights are turned on and this contact is connected, that ground passes through the high beam switch to the low beam relay. And the low beam relay then turns on because it has positive from the battery as well. Now, should we press the high beam switch, it then connects to this contact and turns on the high beams. And it left this contact so the low beams turn off. Now, no matter where this switch is its master. So if the high beams are on and we turn off the low beams, this loses its ground and we no longer have continuity or a circuit to these relays, and the headlights will turn off. Now, because we need to make sure that a main switch that will be here, if you can see that, on this panel, to make sure that it in fact does kill everything in the car, it will control the positive. So the positive to the battery, to the alternator, whatever, have to run through that main switch. So if you turn the main switch off, even if these are all on, you lose your positive, the relays shut off, and you lose your headlights. So we've got control of both ends of this circuit. So hopefully that makes sense. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to run through, there's a little bit more to this as well. I just kind of realized I didn't say that. So we'll get to that later, but this is the nitty gritty of the wipers, or the headlights low and the high beams, and the wipers low and the wipers high. Now these switches are all on their own, and we'll get to those. They're just simple ground in, ground out. So what we're going to do is do a continuity check on these switches now, and hopefully everybody understands exactly what the situation is here, and I'll explain it in practice now. Okay, so this connector here is the connector that all of these switches outputs run to. So they get their source from this ground, as I said a moment ago. So I'm going to connect my digital multimeter to that ground, and then switch it to continuity and turn on the beeper. So if it gets connected, you hear a beep. So now if I go to pin 1 and I turn on the headlights, if I can find it, we have continuity to there. Now if we go to the high beams, which is pin 2, and we turn on the headlights, we have no input. But if I turn on the high beams, we now have input. And if I turn off the headlights, high beam switch is still on, we lose our output. So the master switch turns off all of the headlights. So the high beams are now on, high beams are now off. So now let's do a check on the wipers. So we turn on the wipers low, we have input, turn off the wipers low. Next pin, turn on wipers high, no input, turn on the master wiper switch, which is wipers low, we have input. So essentially the first switch runs through the second switch, and the second switch is just a selector. So we turn on the headlights, and then if the second switch, the headlights high beams, we'll just call it the second switch. If it is off, then we're still going to the low beams. If it is turned on, then it switches to high beams. It's that simple. So now moving on, we go to pin 5, and checking my chart, that is the cool suit. So this will control the cool suit pump. So we turn this on, and the cool suit pump will turn on. Now this next one is to the unassigned switch, which is the third one from the right, or third one from the left on top, and that should be a normally closed. So it should be, put the switch off. The next one is it's normally open. So if I turn it on now, that's embarrassing. It's this one here. It wraps. So if I turn it on now, we have continuity. The next one should be the rain light. So if I turn on the rain light now, we have ground to the rain light. The next pin should be the pit procedure, which this is a cool switch. This will turn on the radiator fan. It'll turn on the wigwags on the steering wheel, which we'll get to later. It'll turn on the interior lights, and it will also turn on a pit limiter. So if we turn this switch on when we come into the pit, we have output. The next one should be the IG2 relay, which IG2 I think is on right now. Okay, so IG2 relay. now grounded, now is not grounded. The next one is the starter relay. Find it right there. This is a moment switch. This does not stay on if we let go of it. So this is like a push button start. So that works. So this last pin here is the LED ground to the steering wheel switches. Now this comes on with the IG2 switch. So when I turn on IG2, we have lights on the steering wheel, lights which on the steering wheel switches, which means that the rest of the switches will be lit up. Now, for a little demonstration of how the illumination works, this is actually pretty cool. It's very simple, so let's check that out. Okay, we are now back to the drawing board, and this circuit is pretty simple. It's kind of tough to point out where all the wires come from and go to exactly, but basically this wire out of the IG2 switch is its output ground, and its output ground is it's actually these two wires here. One is for the IG2 relay, the other one is for the lights. So what happens is when we turn on the IG2 switch, it grounds all of the lights, including the steering wheel lights, through that last pin that I just showed you. Then what happens is if you turn on the headlights, there is a resistor in this junction right here that is on the ground side of all these relays and will make them dimmer, and I will show you how that works. But in order to explain it, we have the IG2 switch ground, comes over to the IG2 switch, the switch is off, then it goes to the common of the headlight switch, and then this is where the difference between this circuit and this circuit comes in, because on this circuit the normally closed of the headlight switch is used. Now that normally closed only goes out to all of the other LED lights and the other switches, and then they go off to power elsewhere. Now when you turn on the headlights, there is a junction, so it comes out of here and it goes to a junction here, and the junction output goes off to the headlight relay, to the low relay, just like it does up here. But out of this junction also it goes into a resistor, which is a 300 ohm, and then goes to the LED relays, or the LED switches, and they go off the positive. So what it does is when you have this off, it's just straight ground right to the LED switches, but when you turn it on, it still goes to LED switches, but it goes through a 300 ohm resistor. And let me show you how that works. Okay, so this wire here goes to all of the LED lights. It's their positive. You saw me make this wire a minute ago. So what I'll do now is just strip off a little bit of the end of it so that my power supply cable can hook to it. So we will hook up power supply. The switch on the power supply will actually be the main switch. It'll be the main power. Then we will hook up ground to the instrument panel chassis ground. Okay, so we've got ground and positive hooked up. We'll turn on the main power. IG2 lights up. That's exactly how that's supposed to be. Now when we press IG2, all of the switches will light up. Now I want to show you in the dark how bright these really are, so I'm going to turn off all the lights. Now this is about how bright it is on the tracks at night. Super dark. You turn these switches on, I'll turn on the main power. Really bright. It's actually, the camera's not really doing it justice. You can see how much it's lighting up my hand. That's a lot of light. And then you turn on all of these switches. Again, really bright, and they're worse if they're aimed at you, but being a driver at night, you can't have this amount of light hitting you because it's distracting and it can mess with your eyes. So what I did is I put that relay, or that resistor, in the headlight switch. So if we turn the headlights on, they dim. Now right now they don't dim a lot because I don't have 6 switches hooked up still. So they'll dim a lot more just because there'll be more outlets. So essentially the idea is that these will just dim more. It's kind of like a water hose. Like if you've got one hose supplying 16 outlets, those outlets aren't going to flow very much. They will, but there's not going to be a lot of water coming to them because it's breaking off in so many different directions. So right now they don't dim a whole lot. They're actually very reasonable right there, but there's still 6 more to hook up. Now IG2 I left bright because I want that, even though we can't read that it says IG2 right there, you can see it kind of reflecting off my finger. It lights up a little bit. You can still see it there. Well, I can't see it now. So I wanted that to always be a very bright switch in case something went wrong. You either hit this switch or the main power right above it. So this is kind of a safety thing. It is just outside of your helmet's view, so your helmet kind of blocks it, but you can tell it's there, and if you glance down at it, it'll be the first thing you see, and you can hit that to kill the car or hit main power and kill the car that way. It's just 2 different methods of shutting the car down. So with that being said, we're ready to move to the next step with this thing. Let's get to it. Alright, so what you're going to see now is I'm going to take this 12-pin plug. This is a plug and this is a receptacle. Male, female, whatever. Male's the plug, female's a receptacle. And I'm going to make the other half of this connector that then branches off, goes to the fuse box, goes to the steering wheel harness, yada yada. So what we're going to do now is put the leads into this and get them ready to be put into the dash. This is the start of the actual dash harness. So this is, again, the plug that is going to come out of this and just extend to the rest of the vehicle. Now I've got these wires in here and they are ready to go. What I'm going to do is cut these zip ties off because they were just kind of keep things tidy while I pinned it, and then we will number all of these with all these wires with their respective output from the connector. But what we'll do is we'll start with putting in the lock. So I've got our 10 pins in here. 2 of them did not get used because they are from the unassigned switch, so there's no need to put wires in just yet. I'll just keep some pins on hand, and then if we need to add some pins, what I'll do is just pop this lock out, snap 2 wires in there and go. But for now we've only got 10 wires coming out of there, and then we'll put in this pin lock, which sometimes is a little tricky. Okay, now all of those pins are locked. They can't come out now. So we'll go through all these in depth now as soon as I cut these zip ties off. Then I'll number them, and then we will kind of tie them together into a tidy harness to go into the vehicle. Now I don't know if I stated this yet, but I'll say it again if I have already said it. I'm not going to loom any of this. I'll loom certain things that I know for sure aren't going to change, but other things I'm not going to loom. I'm just going to tidy it up in the vehicle because I might have to add or subtract, or I might find a problem with my system at the track, and I want to be able to either find it and fix it immediately or find it and replace it immediately. So none of this is going to get loomed for Mid-Ohio until it proves itself, and then as soon as we're done at Mid-Ohio, then I'll either take it out, clean it up, or just take it out and loom it. So this vehicle harness is actually going to be pretty easy to get out of the car. So that being said, let's go through these wires. So we'll start with pin 1, and pin 1 goes to the headlight relay, so this just goes to the fuse box. Pin 2 goes to the headlight high beam relay. Pin 3 goes to the wiper on relay. Pin 4 goes to the wiper high relay. Pin 5 goes to the cool suit pump. Let's see here, number 6, number 7 again are the 2 pins that did not get used. They've got plugs in them right now to just keep the debris from getting in there. Number 8 goes to the rain light, so I've got a really long lead on there. This wire will end up getting cut eventually, so all of this will either just become spare or it will just go through a connector and then continue on to the rain light, but I put it on there so that I make sure I got plenty to complete that circuit. Moving on to pin 9, this is the pit procedure, and it's got 1 pin out, and then it goes into a junction that then splits off into 4. And I've got these cut to different lengths. So how this is going to work is this shortest one here is going to go to the steering wheel to turn on the wig-wag. That'll tell us that the pit limiter is set. The radiator fan's on. The interior light is a little bit of an indication, but sometimes that isn't enough. So I've got these really annoying flashing lights on the steering wheel, and I can show you how those work as well, to remind you that, hey, you can only go 35 or 20 miles an hour depending on the pit speed. That way you don't try to enter the track and freak out. So once you get down to the end of the pit and you stop, those wig-wags are your indication to turn the pit limiter off at that point. Because in Champ Car, you have to stop at the end of the pit road to make sure they reach in the car, make sure that your harness and everything is on and tight, and then you've got your helmet on. So anyway, this goes to the wig-wags, super annoying LEDs on the steering wheel. The next longest one will go to the fuse box, and that will turn on the radiator fan. There's a wire that's a little bit longer that will go to the PCM to set the pit limiter. And then there's a wire that's a little bit longer than that that will go to just an LED strip in the car. So well under 3 amps draw there. So pretty easy. Moving on to pin 10. Pin 10 runs to the IG2 relay. It grounds that relay to turn it on, and then that relay turns on higher power stuff. Basically just kind of turns on the vehicle essentially. So you've got main power that feeds power to everything, but then you've got the IG2 relay that feeds power to those relays that are then controlling other things. That way, even though the main switch is on, if certain things that need a positive input to turn on or have to run through this relay first to make sure that they can't come on until, you know, the IG2 switch is pressed. A little long-winded, sorry, I'm just kind of thinking as I'm talking. So that basically just kind of wakes the car up. Then we've got the starter relay output. So that's pretty simple, just grounds the starter relay, and then the starter relay sends positive signal to the starter to turn it over. And then the last wire here runs to the steering wheel connector that is on the dash beam that turns on the steering wheel LEDs. So what we're going to do now is use this number pad, and we're going to number all of these and make sure that I know where they go, and then we're going to tie them up, make a nice neat harness out of it. So it's getting late. I'm going to wrap it up for now, but you can see underneath here there's definitely been some progress made. Let's see if I can turn my flash on. There we go. You can see a little better. So you can see everything back there, and it looks a little chaotic right now. It still is. You can see this is the back of the dash. I've got all the wires run to the fuse box over this direction. And then I've got all the wires to their switches right there. I mean, you guys have been seeing this for a while. The main switch is in temporarily. It's not bolted down yet. That is the connector, or the bulkhead connector for the steering wheel. Here we have the combi meter and just pigtails leading out of it that will go where they need to go eventually. That stuff will all get wired in when the thing goes back in the car, except for like illumination and stuff. That'll get done here, but like fuel level and stuff like that, that'll wait. But as far as like the gauges, like the tack and the speedo and the coolant temp, they'll run along with these other wires to the PCM, which will be right about here. The main point to be made tonight is that is in, and if you want to take it out, all you have to do loosen these screws. Okay. And then to get this panel out, all you have to do is take off that ground bolt, which is right there. And then undo these 3 connectors and unbolt the main switch, and you can pull this thing out of here. And that'll all have boots on it, so if it falls and hits the grounded dash frame, everything should be fine. But right now we're getting a lot closer, and then we'll have to keep working on the steering wheel. I do have the what button is that? I believe that is the PCM reset. If we have any codes, error codes, we can just press that and see if it was a fluke or limp it back to the pit. We had issues like that last year, so figured I'd put in a switch just to kind of bump that relay. Otherwise, that's where we're at. So we have 51 days until the champ race, and time crunch is on. We still got to paint the inside of the car. I got to wire up the car. We got to get the engine put back together. The suspension's all pretty much there, but we've got quite a bit of work to do, so we need to get hot. So stay tuned. We'll catch you on the next one.